Strategy games can be hit or miss depending on the audience. Take strategy titles. They need to weave intricate systems that are approachable for newcomers, but still deep enough to satisfy hardcore players. Make things too easy to get into, and you risk alienating the latter. Too much complexity, and it's a game that newcomers may think twice about really spending time to learn those ins and outs. Turn-based tactical strategy games are no different, though they often leave more room for experimentation and deviation from the norm. Some take inspiration from XCOM series, widely considered the gold standard, while carving out their own identity like Mutant Year Zero. For all their complexity, the core gameplay loop of jumping into battle, leveraging cover, and outwitting your enemy is surprisingly easy to jump into. Now, with that in mind, today we're checking out Chains of Freedom. It's a mix of turn-based tactical combat and strategy with its own spin on character customization, world building, and even stealth. The game is developed and published by Nord Current, who also happen to be this video's sponsor. They were kind enough to give us access, so huge thanks to them for this opportunity. You can find a link to the game's Steam page in the description below, and there's also a demo available, so if this sounds up your alley, feel free to give it a try. We've spent the last few days digging into this dystopian world, and in this video, we're breaking down everything that you need to know about Chains of Freedom. So, let's dive in. Setting. The world, or this section of it, has seen better days. After a strange meteorite crashes into the Earth, a horrifying mutation spreads and transforms humanity and wildlife into mindless, infected monsters. The infection could twist the environment as well as evolve, creating even stronger creatures. However, long after daily life was altered in unimaginable ways by the infection, the sovereignty rose to the occasion and went about purging the infection and creating a new era of prosperity. Or so the propaganda-ish opening outlines. Though the world is seemingly better off than pre-infection, a conspiracy seemingly unfolds with one's Dr. Svetlov at the center. Possessing a mind-control bioweapon and itching for revenge against the sovereignty, it's your squad's job as peacekeepers to find and execute him. What is Svetlov's greater purpose, and how does it involve those opposed to the authority? How secure and all-powerful is the sovereignty? That's the greater mystery that you have to unravel. Characters. The squad initially consists of Fidel, the hardened, no-nonsense commander who believes wholeheartedly in the sovereignty and isn't exactly thrilled when the operation goes sideways. There's also the more laid-back and merciful Sola, and the straight-laced Corbin, who really goes through it before rejoining the squad. Other NPCs are encountered throughout your journey, like villagers who aren't exactly enthusiastic about life under the sovereignty, and smugglers who try to scavenge anything that they can get their hands on. And they're also surprisingly well-armed and trained. Suffice it to say that there is tons of opposition to this group's mission, and that's all before dealing with Svetlov. There's also a mysterious narrator during certain sections who I'm pretty keen to learn more about. Real-time exploration. Unlike the mission-based structure of XCOM, Chains of Freedom sees you exploring its regions in real time with objectives updating accordingly. Unfolding across a fictitious Eastern European nation, there's a fair bit of variety in the environments as you transition from villages and fields to mines and the ruined remnants of civilization. It's pretty straightforward, though some sections may have small buildings to explore with essential items and materials, gates to unlock, and switches to trigger and progress forward. You'll also come across enemy camps and patrols, but more on that shortly. Turn-based combat. Of course, the combat is the main appeal, and if you've ever played XCOM, Chains of Freedom will feel very familiar. You can take cover, which reduces your chances of getting hit by enemies, and flank for a higher chance of shots landing. Half cover and full cover are available, offering different degrees of protection. That also applies to the enemies, though. Instead of the usual 2, action points are much more granular. For example, one squad member may have a base of 18 action points with varying amounts required for skills and movement. The farther the distance traveled, the more AP consumed, which is something to keep in mind when performing melee attacks and closing the distance with enemies. Once your turn has concluded, the enemy side takes their turn, and so on. Each character has slots for equipping items, which can be used in combat without opening your backpack, thus conserving some action points. It's also worth noting that when allies go down, there's a limited number of turns in which they must be revived, depending on your difficulty. Overwatch also isn't available from the outset, but don't worry, it isn't completely absent either. Focus aim. One of the more intriguing mechanics is focus aim. When an enemy is within range of your shots, you must account for distance, depending on the weapon. If they're behind cover, they also have some evasion, further impacting your base hit chance. By spending more AP, you can activate focus aim, adding a percentage chance to your shots to hit. The more AP spent, the better the increase is gained, with the trade-off being that you won't have enough left over for other actions like, say, repositioning or reloading. Though not every weapon offers the option to focus aim, it's still an intriguing risk versus reward mechanic. You could use it to damage enemies in full cover by pouring action points in, but you may have none when it really matters. Enemies. As mentioned earlier, you'll have quite an assortment of human enemies to deal with, but what about the infected? You have the chasers who, surprise, bum rush without regard for their safety and try to bludgeon you to death. However, much more challenging foes await, like the mutant bat Nocturus at the start, which can fly, thus covering more distance than, say, the hard scale. The latter has a lower health pool and can't travel as far in a single turn, but it makes up for that with armor. More challenging enemy types await to be discovered, including elite-like foes like the Smuggler Phantom, who will attack from afar and mark your squad for his allies to focus their fire on. They don't have the highest health pool, but prioritizing their deaths is paramount to answer a smoother fight. Some fights also require taking out waves of enemies, but on the brighter side, you can exploit environmental objects like explosive barrels to deal some serious damage and then thin the herd. Stealth. However, there are some sections where you aren't always thrust into the heat of battle. Instead, the enemy is patrolling around, and you need to sneak past them to progress. You can ungroup the squad, controlling a single character in real time and avoiding line of sight, perhaps climbing up ladders for a better vantage point. Now, if spotted, enemies have a brief window before they fully detect you and initiate combat, which can be rough since they attack first, and if you're out of cover, well, have fun eating some bullets. However, you can also choose to attack at any time. Maneuver your allies separately, set up an ambush, take down the threats before they even know what hit them, and divvy up the rewards. Scavenging and crafting. Another notable thing about the gameplay is the ammo, or rather its limited nature. You're not walking around with tons of ammo magazines, at least not in the normal difficulty, which is what we played on, so conserving rounds can be essential given the infected. It's also enough incentive to experiment with different weapons and change your playstyles and roles between the fights. You can find more ammo by exploring the environment and slaying enemies, but there's also a streamlined crafting system to make more. Gathering materials like scrap, gunpowder, and chemicals, you can craft handgun ammo, shotgun ammo, and rifle ammo. You may want to save those chemicals to combine them with fabric to create bandages, and maybe use some of those bandages to make a med kit for even more healing. You can even craft explosives like pipe bombs and Molotov cocktails to hurl at grouped up enemies. Firearms. In terms of guns, there's a pretty healthy selection. You have limited options initially, but quickly obtain other weapons like the shotgun, SMG, rifle, crossbows, and even flamethrowers. These occupy the primary slot, while other tools like the handgun go in the secondary slot. You can't equip two primary weapons at a time, but depending on the action points available, it's possible to shoot at an enemy with a primary and finish them with a secondary. Each weapon also has different properties. For instance, the shotgun can't use focus aim because its reticle is a cone. While that can be detrimental in long-range fights, shots are guaranteed to hit multiple enemies simultaneously. Some guns hit multiple times and have a notable increased base critical hit chance at the cost of accuracy. Now, perhaps my favorite so far is the crossbow. Despite its higher than average AP cost, it has a good range and inflicts blood loss on critical hits, ably assisted by a generous base hit chance. And once again, considering all of this while managing shot distance, enemy cover, and ammo is so important to success. Melee weapons. Few tactical turn-based strategy games would be complete without melee weapons, and thankfully, Chains of Freedom offers more than a few. Fidel starts out with the knife, with its lower action point cost being great for dealing with chasers, but you can also discover other options like axes and meat hooks for more diverse close encounters. Beyond dealing decent damage and not consuming too many AP, well, depending on the distance traveled of course, melee weapons are ideal for saving ammo. For instance, you could weaken an enemy with a handgun shot from Sola and then move Fidel in for a knife kill. Alternatively, equip everyone with melee weapons when sneaking around, and when initiating an ambush, bludgeon or stab your enemies to death. Voila! Free resources. Swapping weapons mid-combat. Remember how it's better to use items in quick slots instead of opening your backpack mid-combat to access items? Well, that doesn't mean the latter is completely useless. During the battle with the hard scale, I sent Sola in to grab whatever was on the table nearby, which turned out to be a shotgun, which is more ideal for dealing with it than a handgun or, say, a rifle. After having Fidel equip it and running around a bit more, triggering the explosive barrels to deplete the armor, the shotgun came in handy for dealing damage to the hard scale with some assistance from the burn damage. Similarly, if you're low on ammo, it's possible to swap out a gun for a melee weapon mid-combat, though you ideally want to avoid falling into that situation in the first place. Skills. Though there aren't too many skill options available initially, Fidel does start with the ever so essential uppercut, which can stun an enemy, leaving them unable to take action for a turn. Once Sola repairs his grappling hook, he gains access to grapple, which allows him to quickly take an elevated position. Since the latter grants increased accuracy, you can essentially turn him into a sniper or have him rain down bullets from above. Other skills emerge, especially one essential for XCOM fans: Overwatch, available on the crossbow. It sets the wielder up to fire at any enemy that encounters their vicinity. Imagine setting up an ambush during a stealth section, triggering Overwatch smack dab in the middle, and inviting targets to stick around in more ways than one. With how devastating the weapon is, it's an essential tool for your repertoire. Skills have cooldowns after use, so you need to think carefully beforehand, but they can prove immensely powerful when they're used correctly. Biocrystals. Biocrystals are your ticket for build crafting, and there are plenty to choose from. You'll pick them up throughout the story, and they confer different passive benefits when they're equipped. Sliver of Vitality, for example, will restore 10% of health to each ally on critical hits. Transcendental Relic, on the other hand, allows for carrying over up to 8 unused action points to your next turn. Slab of Devourment, meanwhile, restores up to 15% HP to the wearer on killing an enemy. Maiming Thorn is ideal for lower accuracy weapons since it grants Graze, causing every missed shot to deal 25 to 50% of partial damage. Each biocrystal also grants bonuses to stats like accuracy, maximum HP, critical hit chance, and more, but they're not all without drawbacks. Celestial Dew will increase your max action points by 5, which is great for firing your weapons more or traveling greater distances. However, it instills a penalty called Forsaken, which means dying immediately in combat when your HP is depleted, instead of entering more of a downed state. All characters have 5 slots for equipping biocrystals, though you start with 1 or 2 initially. Still, there are some potentially strong build options even in the early stage. Equip Sola with the crossbow or a high crit chance weapon, take to the high ground for more accuracy, and equip Sliver of Vitality to restore health to allies on every critical hit. You can have your other characters weaken enemies with bullets, give Celestial Dew for more AP, and Slab of Devourment to a melee-focused character, and have them run around, executing threats, and hopefully keeping them alive with the health regen. And remember that this is only in the early going. There are dozens of biocrystals available to unlock with unique passives and bonuses. Difficulty options. Before jumping in, there are 3 difficulties to choose from. Story is a lighter combat challenge with less threatening enemies, more plentiful resources dropping from combat, and no time limit for reviving downed allies. Adventure is a more balanced affair. Enemies will put up more of a fight, but won't necessarily nail every single shot, while resources drop at a regular rate from fights. However, when allies go down, they must be revived within 3 turns or else they will die. And finally, there is Challenge, suited for more hardcore tactical strategy fans. Your foes are more accurate and also deal much more damage while taking less. Resource drops from combat are also reduced, which means being even more careful to conserve your ammo. Downed allies must also be revived within 2 turns, and if all of that wasn't enough, there's a turn limit for each battle, so you must clear it to succeed. Fortunately, if story difficulty is proving too little or challenge difficulty is too much, you can change the difficulty during a playthrough between your battles. PC requirements and performance. Chains of Freedom isn't too heavy, requiring only 5 GB of installation space. Its minimum requirements include an Intel Core i3-8100 or better, 8 GB of RAM, and an NVIDIA GeForce GTX 970 or higher. Recommended requirements include a Core i7-4790 or better, 16 GB of RAM, and a GeForce GTX 1060 or better. I'm currently running on a Core i5-11400 at 2.6 GHz with 32 GB of RAM and an RTX 4060 at 1440p with everything set to high, and I didn't encounter any performance issues. The overall polish is also pretty good with no noticeable bugs or glitches. Alright, so that's everything you need to know about Chains of Freedom. It's got some intriguing ideas, especially if you're into tactical turn-based gameplay with plenty of avenues for build variety, combat strategy, and yes, even some stealth. A big thank you once again to Nord Current for sponsoring this video and giving us access to the game. If you're interested, the Steam link is in the description, and don't forget there is a free demo that you can try right now. If you enjoyed this breakdown, feel free to drop a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more deep dives just like this. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.
No! Keep trying. We're live.